And now, our feature contemplation.
Speaking Cinema with Andrew Schwartz.
Welcome to the Speaking Cinema podcast. I'm your host, Andrew Schwartz, and this is the only podcast about cinema out there that's exclusively about the meaning. So thank you so much for joining us. We have one hell of a movie today. It's a stunning movie. It's astonishing, really. And we have a great guest to discuss it, because today we need to talk about Kevin. Lynne Ramsay's 2011, again, stunning adaptation, absolutely riveting. And our guest is returning, and he's been with us a few times, and he's just great to talk to about pretty much anything. But we did Ghost World together, then we did Moneyball together, and he's back for more, and he's got some thoughts and takes. And
I am back for more.
He's back. He'll be back. He already is back. He's back. His name is Jesse Mendelsohn, here in the studio with me. Thanks for joining us again, Jesse.
Yay, the audience goes wild with recognition.
Remember you were doing this?
Oh, yeah, I was doing
the Queen wave.
Well, I think of it more as the beauty pageant wave.
The beauty pageant wave. That's right.
Yes.
Okay. Well, it obviously helps us to imagine that we have an audience, because we're, I guess, egomaniacs in here.
Yes, always.
But so thank you again for joining us, Jesse. And we've got a really interesting movie to discuss today. And I had seen We Need to Talk About Kevin. I actually own the movie. We've got the DVD cover right in front of us here, just to so that sparks can fly in our brains here. But this was your first time watching the movie. What was that like?
That's right. So I had these preconceived thoughts and notions about what this movie was. And it's not that they were wrong. It's just they weren't right.
Yes.
You know, I had an idea of what it was about, what the relationships were, what the core themes were.
Yeah.
But I was not prepared for what this movie actually was.
Right.
And so I was like, it's fine. Everyone says it's good. I'll watch it someday.
Right.
Then I watch it and I go, never mind. We're doing this right now.
Right.
We're talking about this. I have so much to say.
Oh, that's awesome. And of course, expectations just obliterated, right?
Right.
In some sense. I think it's apparently, unless you've read the novel by Lionel Shriver, upon which this is based, or from which it's adapted, I guess it's pretty much impossible to have like a really clear idea. Maybe if you've seen the trailer, but even then, the trailer is misleading in the sense that I feel like it does sell the movie as more of a kind of typical thriller about, a psychological drama of this kid, and like an evil kid kind of thriller.
Right.
Like maybe The Good Son from the 90s, or, The Bad Seed or something like that. It's not that, and yet it also is.
Right. And the other thing about expectations with this movie is a lot of the key art, and a lot of the images I'd seen over the time were from a specific aspect of this movie that we'll talk about as we get further into the podcast. Mm-hmm. But it's from a specific aspect and a style. And there are two styles of this movie that compete. There's the gritty indie drama look, and then there's this high fidelity, stunning, saturated, brilliant as in brilliance of color.
Right.
Sections and images that shine through, that really cut through some of the, it's not mundane, but it's flatter, it's more grainy, it's more compressed images. So the contrast I did not know about. Mm-hmm. That if I had known that, I probably would have seen this years ago, because I was expecting another good indie drama from the 2010s,
right? Which
I've seen hundreds of.
Yeah, exactly.
So and good ones too.
Right.
So this is just a step above and in a new direction.
Yeah. I think when we had mentioned this as a possibility for the podcast, I think I said something to you along the lines of, "That's one heck of a movie," or something like that. Like, "Oh, that's a film right there." So I just wanted to, I guess I gave you like, "Oh, that it's different." that there's something about it
Right.
that is different and that stands out in some kind of way. It's very prominent. But I also think I did it in a way that doesn't give away what it actually is. Like, someone will exclaim something about a movie and say, oh, that movie is so violent, or that movie's so scary, or something like that. I just kind of said to you, what a movie. And it's just good luck. Good luck watching that.
Yeah, and it triggered me because when you say something like that, it means there's something that I don't know, as opposed to it's a good movie, but it's big.
Right.
Or something.
Right. It's like me telling you, oh, this movie's gonna trick you, or there's something in there that you're not expecting.
Right, without
but
saying
I don't
that.
say it.
So I don't know what it is. I don't know if there's a trick or a twist or the whole thing is told in an unconventional way, as is the case with this movie.
Yeah.
But all I know is there's something there worth seeing.
Yeah, yeah. And it's really fun to have those kinds of cinema compatriots where you trust each other and your judgment, your taste. And even if you're just guessing that the person might like it or might respond to it, you say something like, hey, pal, you got to see this thing.
Right.
Even if you don't say why, or if you don't even think the person's going to like it particularly, there's something about the experience that is worth seeing, and you want to talk about it the way you always do, and do the thing where you deconstruct it, or you just see how it's fun to see how the person reacted to certain moments, certain scenes, or that they might have a take on the whole thing in general, or that they might absolutely abhor the movie, and you want to know why.
Right.
So that's also a possibility. But you have to really trust a friend in order to guide them to watch a movie if you think they're going to hate the movie.
Yeah.
that's a special thing.
Yeah.
That's a special thing. Very risky. So we need to talk about Kevin, so we're going to do it right now. Let's dive into the meaning of Kevin. I want to start with a logline read, which we always do. Let's get ourselves right into the thick of it, Jesse.
Okay.
The logline for We Need to Talk About Kevin is, Kevin's mother struggles to love her strange child, despite the increasingly dangerous things he says and does as he grows up. But Kevin is just getting started, and his final act will be beyond anything anyone imagined.
That gives a little too much away, I think.
I think it does too. It's also two very full sentences.
Right, whereas the movie does not speak in sentences.
Right.
It speaks in fragments, in strips, and dialogue, and
like these vignettes
and thoughts, memories.
Yeah, it is very interesting. Not that the logline has to be a one-to-one with the style of the movie, but you're right about that. It is misleading in that sense, but it's also just when you have the two-sentence logline, it's very much. It's a little jarring because it's supposed to be so condensed and distilled, right? So when you have, this movie has this and this and this and this and this, but there's this and this and this and this, right? It doesn't.
Once you get to the but, then you start giving away too much of the connections and the fun of seeing a movie for the first time,
right?
And this idea, and we're going to be talking spoilers, right? So yeah. So the fact that they talk about the final act. Mm-hmm. is such a disappointing. I mean, I guess you have to get audiences to see a movie en masse.
Yeah, I suppose. And with a movie that's got such a plot that is quite basic, as this is.
Yeah, but I wonder how many people read the logline in detail as they're going on a Friday night or a Sunday afternoon to see this.
I doubt it.
Yeah, it's like a trailer, or they've heard good things, or they saw it was in some good festivals, and or Tilda Swinton.
Yeah.
So it may not spoil too many people, but it definitely feels like an odd piece of marketing.
It does, especially when the whole film rests on. It's true that she does give us a lot of what the movie is about and what it leads to, generally speaking, early on in the film. However, it's disjointed in a way that's purposefully, restrictive of itself until that final act, until that final moment where everything really just clicks together. and it gnarls all together into that final emotional punch that we're supposed to feel.
And the other thing I was thinking about with this log line is by calling it a final act, it makes it sort of grand instead of morose and sad.
Right.
It's misleading on what that act is and what it says.
Yeah.
It's not some heroic act. It's not some final. What was the exact phrase?
But Kevin is just getting started, and his final act will be beyond anything anyone imagined.
Yeah, I would not want to imagine. I wouldn't use imagine for what happens in this movie.
Right. So let's move on to a title take, because I want to get right into this here. The title, quite provocative, is something of a statement, as opposed to, we've been doing a lot of movies on this podcast, incidentally, not by, some sort of... I just so everyone knows, I always kind of pick the movie with the guest. I don't kind of say, hey, Jesse, you want to come on and talk about this movie? We pick it together based on something that we're both passionate about, or we both think that there's a lot to say about it. So, these one-word titles have been popping up just by happenstance. But this title is a little bit more complicated and provocative. We need to talk about Kevin. That's a statement. And I wanted to pivot to you right away, Jesse, because I wanted to see what you thought about this. It is the same title as the book by Lionel Shriver, and so she kept that the same. But what do you think of this title? Is it effective, and what does it ultimately mean for the story?
I think this title is exciting because it talks about two aspects. It really is from the perspective of the audience. But it's also from the perspective of the two lead characters, who I think are Eva and Franklin, and about their relationship and their decisions. Mm-hmm. And at first I thought it was, I really thought about it being the audience talking about the idea of what this means, because we have not dealt with this issue in our society. We talk about it a lot. We'll say there's the argument, not to get too political, but there's the argument about gun control in this case, obviously not being applicable, but
sure.
But weapon control versus mental health, and yet we're kind of doing neither, and we're not really talking about it. We're talking about it, and right. I feel like that's what they're doing, is they're talking about it. Mm-hmm. Non-verbally, because they've been together so long, they don't need to say everything. They already know. It's one of those unspoken relationships,
right?
But some things need to be spoken.
That's interesting. It's almost like a little sort of quip that's repeating in their heads. Oh, we need to talk about Kevin.
Yeah.
But they never actually do.
Yeah, exactly.
Like it's there in the brain meat somewhere, right? But they never actually pull the trigger and do it.
Yeah.
In the way that you're describing. Yeah, that's kind of cool. I guess this, you sort of said your take about the movie, and that's good. I agree and I disagree, and we'll get more into this later, but sure. This title, we need to talk about Kevin. It is we, right, which implies Franklin and Eva, both of his parents.
Of course.
Eva played by Tilda Swinton and Franklin by John C. Reilly, both masterfully, I think. And I think even though it's saying we, I see this movie more as being about, it's tough to hone in on exactly what it's about in terms of, it's about this one thing, but you seem to be saying it's more about sort of a parenthood portrait in general. I think the movie is more about Eva. I agree. I don't think the movie is particularly about Kevin and the details of Kevin, which is ironic to the title, because it's right. We need to talk about that specifically. I think it's more about Eva and her guilt and what the movie is sort of saying about why and how this monster was created, which we'll get into soon.
I absolutely agree with that, actually. I was thinking about the title and that aspect of it, but I have a lot to say about it being Eva's story and not Franklin's.
Sure.
For sure. I definitely agree.
Yeah. But you said those were the two protagonists.
I still think that's the case.
Especially kind of when you put a magnifying glass on just the title and how that pertains to the movie.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, that's the we, and those are the two people involved that do need to talk about Kevin but don't. The failure belongs to both of them in that way.
Yeah.
That kind of a thing.
Yes.
Yeah.
But you're absolutely right that this is more Eva's story. Absolutely.
Oh, okay.
But
Yeah.
I think in terms of the conversation, that's what I think about.
Yeah.
And I have a lot more about Eva that we'll get to later about guilt and what she's thinking.
Yeah.
But in terms of talking about Kevin, yeah, I think it's
on both of them.
Yeah.
For sure.
Especially some of those scenes where he walks away or is silent.
Yes.
It says so
Franklin,
much.
when the father
Franklin.
does, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's so gut-wrenching.
Yeah.
So let's go right into the opening, Jesse. And we always talk about the opening image and then opening sequence here, because that does so much to inform us about the meaning. And we're going to try our best to deconstruct that and see what it means for what the film is actually trying to say. Then what we're going to do is go into scenic view, which is where we look at the whole movie and jump around as we please. And then we'll look at the closing image. Yeah. So all these things are essential. Let's talk about the opening, Jesse. I'm going to quickly summarize it for everyone. It begins with a sprinkler sound effect. First, the sprinkler kind of comes on, and then it keeps it's oscillating or whatever it's doing. Scattering, and it's doing it at this kind of rhythm that's increasing. And it gives way to the opening title, which comes before the opening image. We need to talk about Kevin. It appears quickly and then disappears quickly. I kind of love that. That sort of reinforces what we were talking about as well.
Yeah.
It's kind of in the mind and then it's just gone, right? So, but then that starts to, when that flashes off the screen, the first image we get is this night interior shot with moonlight spilling through these double porch doors with these white see-through curtains gently swaying in the wind. Okay, and we're slowly moving toward the curtains, and we get this sprinkler sound, which seems to increase at a faster rhythm, and it seems they're dialing in on the volume. It gets a little bit more intense, and then we hear these very distant and reverby vocal sounds, like a faint yelling from a far distance or something. And then as we dolly toward those curtains, it dips to white. So the whole screen turns white. And then the sound of that crowd transitions, boom, right into a large screaming crowd. And that large screaming crowd turns out to be that first next image, which is this wide of this dense, sprawling crowd at a tomato festival in Spain. Okay, so, and then the camera slowly kind of cranes down toward the people, and it keeps cutting in closer and closer into the people, and this wave of people we see more detail of as we get closer in. And once we do, we see that these people we can see the texture of everything, that there are smashed tomatoes all over everyone's bodies, and they're throwing them at each other, and they're screaming. We don't know why, but then we kind of see eventually that they're having fun, and they're moving around in it. And everyone is participating, and they're all covered in all of this stuff. So just bodies and bodies, and it's chaos. It's yelling, red junk everywhere, and without really context or sense of location. So Lynne Ramsay just puts us right into this completely new kind of scene. And then we see Eva, the exposition of our lead character, played by Tilda Swinton. And she's kind of crowd surfing the first time we see her. She's literally elevated. She's her arms are out. She's smiling. She's free. She's writhing around joyously in all of this tomato paste. And we hear suddenly the sounds of what we know now are Kevin's arrows shooting and massacring people, kind of cut into this. But faintly enough so that we don't actually know what it is yet. Right. It's just sort of meshing with the excitement crowd sounds from the actual scene that we're watching. Right. And then there's just tomato pulp everywhere. It's being sprayed around, and there's spatter in people's faces. It's running through the streets, literally, and it's just everywhere. So then we cut away to the first time that we see post-massacre Eva in bed and depressed, and that I consider to be the end of the opening sequence. Yeah. So what do you think about this, Jesse?
So the first thing that stands out to me is the moonlight.
Mm-hmm. At the very first image.
Yeah, at the very first image is it's very film moonlight in the sense that it's not natural. It's this approximation, this silvery brightness. There are no shafts of light from the moon.
Right.
It's not strong enough to do what that does. But
Right.
but it's exciting. But it conveys this image.
And just so everyone knows, Jesse is quite an expert on this because you have gaffed and gripped a lot of films.
Yeah, sure. Yeah,
and you
yeah.
know all the equipment. You know exactly what makes certain color temperatures and
Right.
effects and stuff. Yeah.
Oh yeah, of course.
Yeah.
We shouldn't.
I want to make sure everyone knows that you're a wizard in that respect. Yeah.
Noticing the type of blue that you get from that is really important because it contrasts with the red. And because the whole movie is littered with red and blue contrasting each other.
And what do you think that is? What is that saying? The red and the blue. I get maybe warm and cold.
No, it's definitely the two sides pulling on Ava, not so much on Kevin, but on Ava about who she is.
Yeah. And I guess
Which
maybe
I'll get to later.
Yeah, and I guess maybe how she even sees herself
Yes.
post
No, even pre.
massacre and pre. Yeah, you're right. But we do see most of her, like, I think, conflicted in a certain way. No, we see her conflicted even before this happens too. So you're right. I mean, this is really definitely a pervasive theme.
Yeah.
And visually constructed, not just thematically in the dialogue
Yes.
or so on.
There are a ton of visual motifs in this. So to just get to a little bit at the end, just to match this.
Okay.
In the massacre scene, there is a shot of Kevin from behind. Mm-hmm. And there's red and blue lens flares as it pushes in.
Right.
Sort of merging and combining at the very end.
Yeah.
Sort of like acceptance and getting rid of this idea that there are two sides to you and you have to pick.
Yeah, that there's a maybe a spectrum that exists in a person.
Yes.
It's not just one. It's not just the darkness or the warm or the coldness and the light and the warmth. It's,
exactly.
It's all a person is just a palette
and
of
accepting
different
who
colors.
you are for better or for, in this case, worse.
Right. A full acceptance.
So that's definitely I think the beginning and end connective tissue.
Yeah.
Of course, there's more, in terms of color, but yeah.
That's very interesting. Yeah. And this, I think it was in Buñol is the place in Spain. This tomato festival, La Tomatina, I think it's called. It's very striking, and it's kind of weird because, especially as a Westerner myself, who's never seen this festival before, I've seen maybe some things that are slightly similar to it, Mardi Gras and other things that do take place. But
like running with the bulls, concepts like that.
Yeah, and just a lot of color being, executed all around in a lot of different ways. I've seen things like that for Cinco de Mayo. I've seen things like that for Day of the Dead, Dia de los Muertos. I've seen things like that around in this country and the surrounding countries. But once you cross that Atlantic and you go to this thing, I feel like for Americans, and this probably factors into why maybe Eva is so taken by this and why she maybe wants to move more toward that than she ends up doing, that kind of a vibe and that kind of a feel. It's a striking difference from what we're used to doing to celebrate. We have our cake and we sing happy birthday and we do all these kind of like mundane things. You generally don't see Americans writhing around in tomato pulp.
Yeah.
And acting like wild animals. I love that. And it's so free and it seems to be so like organic and such a way to just express yourself and let loose.
Yeah.
And that's what she's doing. But in the context that it's given to us, even before knowing stuff, even just hearing those faint, distant, reverby yells at the beginning and the creepy nature of that opening image with that blue light and those creepy, almost horror trope kind of the breeze, drifting the curtains along, slowly moving toward it, this weird, creepy feeling. And then right after that, we see, without context, because we don't know that people are having a good time.
Right.
Because she opens with that extreme wide. It's amazing. There's something jarring and uncomfortable about it.
Yeah.
Because it's so effusive. There's so many emotions happening that they almost seem like primal.
Yeah.
You know, it's almost feral what's happening to us. And then just the color of the tomatoes and the pulp, the texture, it seems like you can't differentiate it from a mass
massacre.
murder, a
Yeah,
mass
yeah.
massacre until we close in.
Yeah, of course. So here's the question I have for you.
Okay.
We're jumping ahead a bit, but I think it's important because
Sure.
it really is about this opening tomato festival.
Mm-hmm.
We see other flashbacks throughout the film. It's really one section split up over a couple times where Eva and Franklin, John C. Reilly and Tilda Swinton sort of find each other in this moonlight, actually less moonlight, more dark and street lampy. I believe walk and they're in this hotel and they're passionate and they're falling in love and it feels like a vacation thing. Do you think that's at this tomato festival?
I do.
I do too.
Yeah.
Okay,
I think
good.
they're too American. Yeah, I just got that feeling. The settings seem to be similar. The style of the flashback sort of imagery, how it flows, the looseness of it, it seems to be very similar. And what's interesting to me is even if it wasn't at the Tomato Festival, I think that the movie is so closely attached to Eva's perspective and consciousness that it doesn't even matter because I think
she connects it.
Yeah, she connects it. And Ramsay's telling us that she's in the same emotional state. Yeah. She's in the same mode of freedom and you know, beautiful
expressing yourself however you want.
Yes, the serendipity of life's treasures and surprises is all there.
And so I think this is my big take for the movie.
Okay.
I think that Eva considers Eva? Is it Eva?
Either one. Yeah.
Considers this tomato festival, this trip that she meets Franklin on, where they fall in love and are free and are open as original sin.
Mm-hmm.
I think she thinks this is her original sin. You know, I'm not very religious, but I'm also not Christian, or Catholic. But the idea of born in sin, I think she feels that she has done something wrong, and that's why she's replaying everything in her mind.
Yeah,
and I think that this Red Tomato Festival, this freedom, this letting everything go, is the kind of spirit that allowed this to happen. And there's darkness in her too. There's a lot of darkness. We see a lot of it come out in moments that are unexpected, not just with Kevin.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think that's a really cool kind of spiritual take. I want to give you mine because
please.
I think it sort of intersects with that a little bit, but I definitely agree that the Tomato Festival was an event. I don't think it has. I didn't see it as the sort of spiritual significance, even to Eva, particularly, that I think you do. But I see this general. I have this general idea that Eva is guilty throughout the movie for something. I think original sin is a great way to put it. Except I don't think there was one particular event per se. But I think that the whole movie is trying to tell us that this woman is she's treading in a certain direction that's against her nature and her will.
Yeah.
And I think that sort of abandonment of her own best possible trajectory for herself, that freedom, that essence of individuality that she has in her. And of course she's gone wayward because of love, and that's quite innocent, but it's her own guilt for herself as a character in doing that, in making that split, that fork in the road, taking that one other direction, becoming a mother and doing the family life thing and kind of bogging herself down, mooring herself to one place. That creates, once she gets pregnant, I think it's almost like the story is telling us she gets this idea in her head that she is now doing a thing, right? Living a path. Because once you get pregnant, that's, the kids come and everything changes, right? So, this ties a lot into Lionel Shriver, and I'll talk about that in a second, the original novelist and her intentions. But I feel like when she was pregnant, the movie's showing us, after this opening sequence, that as soon as she gets pregnant, she's not happy. She is, smitten with some kind of, maybe a little excitement and nervousness, but something's wrong internally with her. And I think that there's this kind of, the spiritual aspect of my take is that there is this attitude, this negative attitude that she has toward where she's going and what she's doing, that's fermenting in the child. She's not doing her best thing unless she's not doing her. She's living in a way that she wasn't maybe supposed to in some sense.
And of course, there's
and that's baking inside her, in the child.
Yeah.
And that's creating the monster that will only get worse. It's an interior thing. This is why I love movies like this. I think it's a very internal thing for Eva to have that sort of mentality. And then because she kind of gives that to the child for 9 months, it becomes external. It becomes the physical monster.
Interesting.
That plagues her in many different ways. In the same way that a negative thought or an anxious thought can plague you throughout your life, no matter what you're doing and no matter what choices you make that are other than that. It's always there. And what's more always there and personal to you beside thoughts than your child?
Right.
So that to me is sort of like the origin story of the monster.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely didn't see it that way. I definitely saw it more as a reflection of Eva's nature.
Sure.
In general.
Yeah.
Even before. Mm-hmm. But that is interesting. I never considered that.
Yeah. And it's weird because I think we are saying the same thing.
We're saying very similar.
Kevin is a reflection of her nature, but at the time,
but she
because
goes
of a
with
choice she made.
Right.
Yeah.
But she splits off and follows nurture, and he follows nature.
Yes.
She follows nurture. She does what society expects.
Right.
She takes care of the kid. She's the mother. She writes.
Right.
She's at home. Franklin comes in and witnesses 5 seconds out of a day and makes a judgment.
Yes. And this, it's so chilling, but I'm even getting goosebumps just thinking about it right now. But this opening image, the literal first frame in the movie,
The window.
These curtains, the window, it's her, we realize later on, it's her approaching it. That's the moment I think that Ramsay gives us first, because a sort of determinism factor here, right? This is or fate, some sort of fate, which is different than determinism. But there's a sense that this is where this character is going. This door, this window. Once she walks through this, she can't walk back out, and this is the door of fate of some sort that this story has led to.
Yeah.
Because to me, it's one thing for Kevin to murder other people, right? And that's going to mess with Ava forever. But once she walks through that door, she realizes that Kevin hasn't only destroyed her reputation and all of the sort of external, outside of the family factors that are in her life. He's destroyed everything that she's worked and has sacrificed to create.
Yeah.
Right?
For him and along with him. Yeah.
Via him as her child. And that's the devastating nature of the movie. And that we'll talk about that more at the end.
Right, but what makes that sequence more sad really is the divorce. The fact is the fact that he won't even discuss. Well, that's the other thing about we need to talk about Kevin is even when they're getting divorced because of Franklin watching Eva's actions and blaming her for a lot of it and not discussing it, he decides he can't take it anymore and has to leave.
Yeah.
And then they get back together without saying anything either.
Yeah.
I mean, who knows if they'd last, but he had he said, you know what, I think I'm going to stay.
Yeah.
And then this happens.
Yeah. And there could be something that's trying to be said, and I think that Ramsay understood this, but something that that Shriver, the novelist, was trying to say, maybe about popular, modern American family culture, right? It's interesting because this movie was made in the UK, and with money from the UK, and Tilda Swinton is British, and Lynne Ramsay is Scottish, and it's got that whole kind of, that's where it was born. And Lionel Shriver is interesting because she is American, but moved to the UK and I believe still resides there. So there's this Americana perspective, but also shrouded inside this other place that's different, that's kind of looking in from an outside perspective on the culture that's here. And Shriver is sort of the perfect person to do that because she lived and grew up here in America and now in the UK, so she's seen both sides of this. So it definitely has a very, in my opinion, some kind of an objective view, or at least a different kind of view that we don't ordinarily
an outside
see.
lens as opposed to personal and in there.
Exactly. Yeah. And that gives it a different kind of flavor. It's a little darker. It's a little more direct and stark and, brave. And I think that's definitely part of it. She's a very eloquent speaker, and she talks a lot about this movie, or this story, Kevin, being born of a taboo that she had discovered that wasn't really broken down or talked about. She said it was very difficult to find a taboo subject that we haven't, analyzed to death. And this is one of them, the sort of sociopathic child, or at least a child that the parent doesn't like, being talked about and given its full legs as a story, and not just its full legs as a story for a movie or a book, but taking it to a place, at a consequential ending that is horrible for everyone involved. And again, something that's absolutely rampant even then in 2011 when this was made, or even 1999, and all these mass shootings and so on in this country. It's a huge, huge, huge problem. Yeah. So I just feel like Shriver was distilling all of these different things, or synthesizing rather, into this incredibly stark and honest story, stripped down to the absolute, this is the worst thing that could happen. Yeah. But it does happen in these children, psychopathology, sociopathy, these things start. I think it's also called antisocial personality disorder is the proper name for it. But I was reading that it starts as soon as 5 years old or so in the child, when it's fully kind of formed and the manipulation starts and so on. Kevin's even before that, right? We'll give it some poetic license. But Shriver herself, last thing I'll say about her for now is she never wanted a child. And she felt like there was this taboo of that in and of itself. Society tells us that this is what it's supposed to be like to have a child. This is what you need to do in order to have a child. Unconditional love all the time, constantly. Every child is beautiful. Every child is innocent, right? Every child is perfect in a sense, unless corrupted by the parent. Yeah. Unless
spoiled.
Yeah. And this movie completely uproots that and upends it in some ways. But yet in other ways, it plays it so ambivalently, and it rides that line so well, where it's very interpretable in two different ways. Yeah. Is everything Kevin's fault? Is everything Eva's fault? And Shriver actually also said that book clubs, once this was on the bestseller list and quite popular, this novel, book clubs would have ferocious arguments about whether it was Kevin's fault or Eva's fault, or both. So, and it seems like people are still talking about that with the movie as well.
Yeah.
So, but chilling.
Yeah. One of my favorite examples of this sort of whose fault is this is another motif, a visual motif, which are the eggs. Mm-hmm. There's a scene where he's eating eggs where there are eggshells in his scrambled eggs.
Yeah, that was her, actually. Yeah.
Oh, I may have missed something. Maybe I'll back up on this. But either way, they're broken eggs in the supermarket. They throw rotten eggs at her house on Halloween, and it just gets me to think of like a bad egg. You know, it just sort of like grazes that idea.
Yeah. The eggs at the supermarket is interesting because I guess it's implied that other woman whose daughter or son died during the massacre smashed her eggs when she wasn't looking. And that brings about the question of, are there just bad eggs, or does someone create a bad egg? So to speak, a chicken or egg problem, right?
Yeah.
So, that's something that I think that Ramsay absolutely excels at in this movie. Oh my goodness, Jesse, are there visual motifs aplenty here? And they're all very specific and very clear and deliberate in what they're trying to tell us.
I mean, when she's hiding from her, yes, it's soup cans and it's striking. They're all the same, but it's red.
Yeah.
She's hiding from the woman in the supermarket and she's covered in red.
Right.
Her house, the whole movie, she's cleaning this house.
Right. Yeah.
She's cleaning up after him.
A lot of red.
Yeah.
Some people have. I think we're transitioning now into scenic view.
Oh, of course.
Right.
Yeah. At this point,
is now we can jump around in our imaginary
remote
control and just kind of click anywhere in the movie that we want. But yeah, the red. This movie gets a lot of flack because they think that the red is completely superfluous. Well, there's a lot that red makes sense, of course, but there's a very popular argument out there that the red is just dialed in way too much and it takes people out or it annoys people and so on. What do you, because I have something I think about it. What do you think about so much red being used constantly? Did it bother you?
No, it didn't bother me. It got me excited. It got me thinking about why that choice was made. Mm-hmm. And it stimulated the mind on studying the visual aspects, not just studying who these people were, but saying the visuals are saying something. What are they saying?
Yeah,
and I think it when I saw that blue image of the window in the beginning, I went, oh, and then when we got the Tomato Festival, I went, ooh, and I was hooked. It was this yin and yang, and then this combination of rich saturation followed by because if you start on the house with red paint and this drab house that she's moved into, you think of this movie in one way.
Right.
But by opening with these strong images, it gets you to think, okay, there's something in the visuals, not just the theme and the meaning.
Right. It's the entire idea of conflict running the show.
Yeah.
Right. Conflict in every seam of this fabric. And of just life in general, but particularly Eva's life and Eva's perspective. And that's why I really enjoy it. And it's funny because, man, I must have seen this movie 3-4 times before we decided to do this, but it had been a while. So on my first rewatch for this podcast, which was, who knows, 4 or 5 times, the red definitely, it irked me a little bit. Because I had remembered people saying that. And this time I didn't watch it from my own personal perspective. I was watching it for arguments from other people.
Right.
And I was thinking, oh yeah, okay, that's definitely laid on a little thick there and so on. But then the second or third rewatch for this podcast, I can't remember which one, just watched the movie a million damn times, I realized a couple things. First of all, that I completely let go of whatever sort of preconceived notions I was looking for from other people. And watching the film, I ended up loving the red because it was such a specific choice that, and I had thought of this take of the entire movie is so intricately focused narrowly on Eva's perspective, particularly. Almost like her, just like her stream of consciousness style of thinking being revealed through these images. Because at first, again, I also wasn't quite crazy about just how nonlinear it was, just how jumpy, just how, I guess you could say, confusing, but not so much in retrospect or on a rewatch, right?
Right.
But a lot of red and this bounciness, this nonlinear nature, I think she's just outlining Eva's perspective and the guilt that's constantly running through her head like a loop. And she's just putting us in that character's consciousness. And so she's seeing the red everywhere.
Yeah.
And it's annoying her. The character herself is bothered by it and annoyed by it and bogged down by it. And so are we, because of that particular choice of approach, that this whole thing is supposed to be Eva's consciousness, you know?
Yeah.
And that's fascinating to me. And I love that. I love when a director dedicates themselves fully and unflinchingly to a perspective.
Yeah.
Whether it's their own perspective, right? Or whether it's them taking a character in the story and just wringing out that character for us. You know, doing all of this tough, deep, detailed work to give us a sense of what we can never truly have in real life, diving into someone else's consciousness, the experience of what it's like to be a person in a specific scenario, you know, with a specific life and a specific family and specific trauma. It's so hard to access that truly, like to experience each other's traumas and how that actually takes a toll and effect. This kind of a film, I think, comes the closest possible to transferring your soul into someone else. And that is fascinating as hell.
And what I love about the perspective is that it absolutely feels like that moment where you have a memory. It feels like you remember something and you don't like it.
Yeah.
You're trying to shake off a memory.
Yeah.
Or you're trying to embrace a sweet memory.
And the shaky cam and the fuzziness, the colors melding together.
Yeah, and the difference between the way you feel watching them walk down the street or in bed or, you know, in Spain or wherever it was.
Right.
It feels like she's clinging on to this.
Yes.
Whereas the others, she's trying to push out as fast as she can. That's why we stay in those scenes for so little.
Right.
And she only remembers the big moments.
Yeah.
And even
the formative ones.
The formative moments. And even there's the scene with the drain cleaner where we don't see what happens because Eva doesn't see what happens. She's not there in the moment.
Right. And
we just sit in silence in the hospital with these giant balloons for this little kid.
It's so devastating.
And they're just sitting there quietly, not talking about it.
Yes.
And then he says, "It's your fault," and walks away.
Right.
I mean, he says, "Why didn't you put the drain cleaner away?" And she goes, "I did." And it never occurs to him that his beautiful son would would be able to undo the lock because he's 15 or 16, not 8.
Not the sweet little boy.
Yeah,
he's just a sweet little boy.
The sweet little boy who says, "You got me a bow and arrow for my birthday, Dad. This is the best gift ever."
Yeah.
You know, that hug and that moment, it feels like that teenage appreciation without feeling. It's like when you know you got something you want and you're happy, but you don't feel it towards the person, so you act like you do.
Yes.
Except the whole thing is an act.
Yes.
I mean, he still is excited about it, but the whole presentation to his father is an act, and you think it's an act because he's a teenager. Right. You know, playing along because that's what teenagers are supposed to do. Right. So he never believes it. Right. And he won't accept her idea, and they just don't talk about it.
Yeah. And there's so much manipulate, like you said, it's an act, which we want to discover on our own and not in the log line. But just to reiterate, but this performative nature to it, and it's very manipulation seems to be part and parcel of this antisocial personality disorder, this sociopathy, this psychopathy. it's so narcissistic in nature, and it's the entire world revolves around your own trajectory, what you want to do, what we want to accomplish. But it gets so complicated in here as well, because he does seem to have this sort of philosophy in the movie, Kevin, that is, of I'm going to play with the pieces that are around me because it's a game, and there are pieces to this game, like little pieces that you move,
right.
Like little checkers or something, and that's his fun, and that to him seems to be the point of life, which is basically what life is to most teenagers.
Yeah.
Right? You're playing with the pieces in play and seeing what the effects are and having fun with it. Whereas when you grow older, there's a much more serious nature to, I don't want to touch this piece because that's going to affect this piece and then this one, and that goes back on me and I have to deal with it. Right?
Yeah.
He's being very experimental, which is normal for a teenager. However, you add this kind of total narcissistic approach to everything, and this kind of nihilistic one as well. And I think that he's able to manipulate both of the parents very well. I think his father more than his mother, but he's able to do that because he has this kind of philosophy that I think it's at one point he says something like, when she asks him about the virus, why would you have something like that? What's the point? Right? What's the point with messing with the pieces of life like that? And he says, there is no point. That's the point. So there's a kind of nihilism that's intertwined into his personal philosophy, right? And we kind of already talked about what sort of generated that, the birth of the monster. But is there a consistency to it? I think so. It doesn't necessarily mean that it just logically leads to him killing as many people as he can, right? But I think that he has some sort of self-worshiping religious type devotion to his own perspective, his own way of thinking, his own thoughts, how he sees the world. It is the skeleton key to unlocking all of the wisdom and the purpose of life. Okay, which is, again, could be read as a sort of typical teenage hubris, say. But it's also a malignant narcissism that shows its ugly face in different ways.
Right.
Right?
And it comes at a time in the film where Eva's really searching for something.
Yeah.
And she looks through his room, and there's nothing that's his. Mm-hmm. The bed is so plain. The sheets are just... they're all a mask.
Yeah.
The notebooks are empty. The cabinets are full.
Yeah. It's like he's an empty vessel of a person.
Or he wants to be seen that way.
Yes. He wants to be seen that way. For some reason, there's something chiseling away at her. She knows there's something so wrong. And in her performance, in Swinton's performance, you can just see in almost every single scene, because she's in, I think, every single scene. Mm-hmm. In every moment, you can see the blankness, the vacuousness in her eyes when she comes to that realization that this child there's something horribly wrong and unique here, but she just can't help but keep suppressing it.
Yeah, and it all comes out in this one moment. One of my, I think on the rewatch, my favorite moment in the movie is when they're all lying on the couch. The sister, I think Celia, has her eye patch, and they're lying on this couch. John C. Reilly's barefoot. She's in the daughter's in the middle. They're not, the couple isn't together, but they aren't apart. They're comfortable in this space, and it looks so natural. It's so hard to act natural in a movie, but to just watch TV as a family and look like a family is so difficult to do. And then Kevin walks in and says, "Hey, do you want to collect arrows for me?" That phrase. Yeah. Do you want to collect arrows for me? Right. And Tilda Swinton screams no. Right. And it's just instant. And she knows.
Right.
And it's awful because that's what everyone's doing in his mind, just collecting arrows for him.
Right. And that's a very important scene because that's the first time that I think Eva like acts against him very strongly
In front of people.
protect the innocent girl, to protect people. And then after that happens, I think Franklin gets up and leaves.
It's probably the single best performance I've ever seen. That moment when he just gets up and walks out, that is one of the best performances I've ever seen because it says so much and he looks so natural. It doesn't feel mannered or forced. He just goes, again, this is never ending.
Right, and we get that idea just from him walking away. And
he doesn't even make a big deal out of it. He just decides to do something else.
Right, because I think
the
next scene or two after that, maybe even the very next moment, is them talking about getting divorced.
Yes. I love that we're talking about this movie so out of order. We almost put the movie back in order, right? Chronology. Exactly. No, but we created a new order. The Speaking Cinema cut of
exactly. Is the director's cut, and then there's the analyzer's cut.
Yeah, exactly. Where we put it in a new, different order.
So I have a question about you. I have a question about that. So if you think his performance is so good and convincing in that moment where he does that, did you feel the same way in the hospital?
Yeah.
When he gets up and leaves?
Not as much.
Because it's very similar.
It's very similar.
Yeah.
There's something, it's hard to describe, but in the house, there's something about being natural in a home that isn't yours. It's one thing to do, there's some unnatural, it's easier to do in a hospital because that's not your home. But if you're pretending that you live here and if I had my choice, if there were no cameras and no crew, I would sit right here like this. It's not for camera.
Right.
It's for me.
Right.
And that's what it looks like. Mm-hmm. And that's what's incredible about that moment is it looks like this house is his.
Yeah.
And that is so hard because, maybe this was shot later in the schedule. They only had 30 days to shoot this and there's a lot to shoot and Franklin's not in it that much. So it's not like he's in this house for weeks.
Right.
To be able to own a space and to feel natural in a space is so hard.
Yeah. And it just gives it so much more authenticity.
Yeah.
And then thereby giving it so much more meaning.
Yeah.
Right. So, it's very masterful in the sense that Ramsay seems to know exactly what she has, what the resources are, and then be able to shoot it in such a way where everything needs to hit and then cutting it in a way where everything hits even more elevating every moment.
Yeah. It's greater than the sum of, that whole.
Exactly. It does become greater than the sum of its parts. But we are talking about the parts.
And they're each incredible.
Yeah. Yeah, they really are. So I want to ask you about a couple things. First of all, you said that upon your rewatch, you told me that your rewatch, you were going to see something else. And then you said, I'll watch Kevin again, or maybe the opening or something like that.
I was really focusing on the opening image.
The opening image.
I was going to watch it the next night.
And then you said you were hooked. And did you watch the rest of the movie?
Yeah, I watched the whole thing.
So
I wasn't planning to. It was at night, so I was going to channel flip.
Right. Briefly, because this isn't as much meaning as it is craft, but I guess it does tie in. Why were you hooked?
So this was my first rewatch, so my second time watching it. I was planning on watching it later, but for this podcast. But there was a moment that hit me. It really was the Tomato Festival, the second shot in the movie, when I realized, this is what it's about. It's about Eva. This is where I really started forming my ideas about this film.
Yeah, the rewatch.
Yeah,
me too.
Is understanding Eva and how she feels about her choices in life causing this. And obviously the idea of original sin, I'm not actually saying that he was born in sin. I'm saying that that's her perspective about creating this monster in her eyes. And then we go right into the house and someone's throwing red paint on her house and car. And she basically she does a little bit of cleaning, but not much, but it's so much. She can't do it on the way to her interview for this BS job.
Yeah.
But she spends the whole movie scraping, washing, rubbing. Her fingernails are painted, are scraping. She's getting in between the trim, the borders, whatever.
Yeah.
The whole movie. And when that started, I just was it just, everything hit me.
And then, so is that to say that you needed to keep watching to see how she, so to speak,
I just wanted to see every connection. I wanted to see every connection. She's cleaning up after him.
Right.
You know, it's her mess.
Washing her own mess and washing the mess, washing the blood off her hands.
Yeah, she treats him like her. They're the same. And to me, the moment, like the first time I just watched it and I was riveted. The second time I was like screaming in the theater type. You know, there's this, like when she screams no, like I mentioned earlier, about the collecting arrows. I jumped up. I was like, oh my God, I know what that means.
Yeah.
And I did that so many times. There was the scene where they're trying to have dinner, where they're making plans together. And he's like, whatever, I guess we don't really do that. I'll just play along. Yeah. And then he has this incredible like teenager speech about like what's really cutting through the BS.
Oh, at the dinner?
Yeah, at the dinner.
Yeah.
After he ate like a whole rotisserie chicken. But she doesn't respond because she's stunned. It's not that there isn't a response. It's not that there isn't a way to rebut it. It's just she doesn't know it. But the moment when they're mini golfing, when she says, "You could be harsh sometimes."
Oh yeah, yeah.
And he responds with, "Where do you think I got that from?"
Right.
I was like, "Oh my God, they're talking about Ava."
Yeah.
Eva.
Yeah.
She's where he got it from. You know, it's like the rewatch is screaming at you. It's telling you boldly.
Yes. All of the things that you need to know.
Yeah.
In order to know that this is Eva's perspective of everything. And it's entirely basically just her meditation while she's in exile. Her own self-induced exile and self-induced prison. Because another thing I was going to ask you was, why does Eva stay in town? You know, she could live anywhere, but she stays in town. She works in town. Why doesn't she move away? You know, she stays there, sniffing the old clothes of her family. Yeah. What is she doing?
I mean, she preserves his bedroom just the way he had it, which is not personal at all. Well, it's very personal, but it doesn't feel personal. It feels, that's such a great question, because originally I thought, you know, she probably doesn't have money anymore. You know, she all the lawyer stuff, selling the house, like, you know, no dual income anymore. Yeah. You know, she probably can't, people probably won't buy her books anymore. Right. So she probably has no income. Right. Even if she had money before. Mm-hmm. So what are her choices? You know, even moving out of town is expensive. Even if you were to pay for the same kind of house and with the same kind of job that she does get within town. Right. It probably is hard to move, on top of the fact that she can't let go. Yeah. And also she we haven't even talked about this, how much she visits him. Yes. Oh yeah, we'll definitely get there more, because that also ties right in with the ending as well. Of course. Right? But the fact that she goes in the beginning, and then the guard knows her name and is polite. Yes. Not the sign-in guard, but the guard who walks. Yes. Her. Yeah. So there's another question that's rattling around in my mind, Jesse. Mm-hmm. Hoping you could help us out with this. We did not talk about this in our pre-chat, although we were going to talk about a lot of color, and we talked about color already, but just to go back to color for a second, this is something I noticed on my 15,001st rewatch. Yeah. And I realized it wasn't just a red motif. I hope I'm not going to blow your mind irreversibly now, but if you pay attention to this movie, all of the colors of the archery target are constantly being rehashed in almost every consequential scene. The paint being thrown around everywhere. The colors, I'm getting chills just thinking about it. The colors of the lens flares. Yeah. Traffic lights. Yep. The reds, yellows, blues, blacks that make up the archery target. The extreme close-up of the target on his eye. Yeah, of course. You know, the target being in the background when she lies on the bed, miserable because she just saw her daughter and husband were killed. All the paint,
the toys for the children's toys, even when they grow up. Kevin's shirt with the ketchup and the mustard things on it. Same archery
it's yellow,
target
black,
colors.
red, and
blue. It's unbelievable. So I was wondering, I didn't give you much time to think about this ahead of time, to be fair.
Yeah.
But I was just wondering if there's an idea that I was thinking about there's this sense that the movie's saying that the end is built into the beginning, a sort of determinism. Things were always going to end up like this. The consequences of and the means of with which those consequences are executed of all these decisions are sprinkled throughout every element that led up to it.
Yeah.
Is it that, or is it just some sort of indication that it's Eva's perspective on everything, and that's why we're seeing it this way? It's because it's all painted with her brush, her point of view, remembering all of this through the lens of what it led to.
Even before you laid out the two options, I was going to say Eva's perspective.
Okay, cool.
I was like, no, I don't think it's determinism.
Right.
I just don't think it's fate because Kevin makes the decision to do it. He makes a dozen decisions to plan. He buys the locks. He
and even the locks are yellow.
Yeah, of course.
It's like everything. Once you rewatch it again now for like the 15th time.
Yeah, I'm gonna keep an eye out for the color. Definitely,
it's unbelievable.
But I really think it is Eva's perspective. This whole thing is everything is zoned in on what she thought she could do, what she could change. Breaking his arm, being there's juxtaposition in the counting even. They both count to 50, and he does it no problem. Mm-hmm. And she's sort of getting there.
Yeah.
And he's doing it to spite her, and she's doing it to be proud.
Yeah.
And that's just a side thing that, like, she's looking at every moment, and the colors are guiding her.
Yeah.
Her thoughts.
Yeah. It's such a brilliant way, and there's no other way to put it. It's such an amazingly brilliant way to visually show someone's perspective and someone's bias, and how even in our memories, the memories are painted, in this case literally with certain colors. Our memories are painted with bias and perspective, and sometimes even distortions in order to prove some kind of a point that we want to be true, or a point that we didn't realize before, but we learn later on, like her learning that just what Kevin is capable of. So then every single moment is painted with some kind of elements of an archery target.
Yeah.
Which of course goes into this idea that Kevin is focused on a particular goal, a target.
Yeah.
There's that target symbol on his cabinet too when she goes into his room. Mm-hmm. And again, I just have to reiterate that first time that we see that target in his eyes. Yeah. And she just gives us this incredible scene where we go into an extreme close-up, like right into his retina. And with this ringing sort of strange music, this strange droning, very unnatural kind of a sound, which are maybe these very... these unusual and sickly cogs rotating in his brain, formulating an idea of what to do about this world, right? The machinations working while he's staring at this thing and realizing his capabilities. There's something so profoundly disturbing in all of this as well. And this is what I'd like to shift to also. Speaking of scenes, and profoundly disturbing. And I also think that we're going to get into sound as well, because Ramsay uses sound in such an interesting and clever way. I think this is why Shriver loved this movie. She said, what a great adaptation of my book, because Ramsay does all this stuff. She uses all of the elements and the levers available to us in cinema, the sounds and the sights that are not available in a novel, right? In order to accentuate everything. But here's the thing. The lychee scene.
I was about to say
when
that.
he destroys the sucks on the lychee and destroys it right after, of course, the daughter loses her eye, needs a glass eye. I wanted to know what your reaction was to this, and maybe we can get into also talking about how she uses sound.
It's the grossest thing in the movie for sure. It's the hardest thing to watch,
even more than arrows halfway through teenagers dead on the
because he knows
stretcher.
what he's doing.
Yeah,
and it's so obvious. And the dad's like, he's just a teenager being a dick.
Yeah.
Or a teenager being, pushing buttons.
Right.
But man, oh my God. And the thing he's talking about, it's like, she's a kid, she'll get over it. I've had stuff happen to me. Oh, that idea.
Yes. She has to suck it up, I think he says.
Yeah.
And then he literally sucks on the lychee, sucks all the juice out of it, and it's just unbelievable. Yeah, and obviously the lychee looks exactly like an eyeball.
Yeah, of course.
So, and it's so obvious that it's barely a metaphor. But I think what at least what it did for me was it was the first time that we see Kevin doing something, committing an action, not even just whatever he did to set up the girl to lose her eye or whatever. In that moment at the dinner table, he's advertising his insanity, essentially, and
he's pushing the bounds.
He's pushing the boundaries
of how much he can hide it.
Right, and it reminded me of this movie called Rope by Alfred Hitchcock.
Oh yeah,
I don't know if you've ever seen it.
I've seen it.
Brilliant movie, right? Do you remember that in this movie, the whole entire movie is like 5 or 6 shots. That's one thing that's very innovative about it.
I think it's a lot more, but there are long takes.
Very long takes.
Yeah. And everything's stitched together, pre-planned, so it looks like it's a oneer, but they're clearly like maybe,
Yeah, we're in the 50s, so there's only so much they can do.
Yeah. And the magazines of film are so low, it's probably like 6, 8, 12 minutes at most.
Right.
So you can't do it in 5, even
Right.
if you
Right.
even if you wanted to.
Right, but for those of you that haven't seen or heard of Rope, this is an Alfred Hitchcock thriller with Jimmy Stewart, of course. And in the movie, there are these two killers that have murdered someone, and they host this party at their apartment. And one of the people that they invite to the party is, I believe, Jimmy Stewart, who plays the cop.
No, he's the professor.
Is it professor? Oh, that's right. I haven't seen it in a while. He's an old professor, and there's someone else who's like a cop or something. And they all assemble at this party, and little do they know that there's a dead body that they just murdered in the house.
Under the dinner table.
Yeah.
In this sort of like a cabinet table thing where you lift the top off.
It opens and you can put something inside.
Yeah.
There's a body in there.
And they're playing a game of they think one of the characters thinks it's funny to see if they can figure it out because the professor knows this person.
Right.
And was expecting them to be at this party.
Right. And there's this sense that they just kind of, like you said, it's funny to them. They get off on this somehow. It's titillating for them to host a party and to advertise without overtly advertising what they've done.
Yeah.
There's a screwing with society nature to it, which seems to be part of Kevin's mentality, that he's almost begging to be seen. Look what I've done. Look at the art that I've created. That it's so antithetical to what everyone else is doing in the world, what they want for themselves, what they want for other people. This is so works against that, against the rhythm of everything else, the grain that we want people to subliminally even experience it. And I feel like Kevin gave me a similar feeling in this scene.
The lychee scene. Yeah.
Look at what I've done, Mom. I've accomplished this through manipulation. I'm good at something. Don't you know? And aren't you proud, at least, that I'm good at something? You hate me with every fiber of yourself, right?
Yeah.
But aren't you, in a sense, somewhere on some planet, in some distant galaxy, in some alternate dimension, aren't you proud of me for being able to do this, right? And that also seems to give me that feeling that I've got throughout the movie and other places, that Kevin really also he feels just at the end of the day misunderstood. and not seen.
Yeah.
He feels like he is very different from other people. He's not socially. The movie doesn't show him having any friends. Even in his dinner conversation with Mom, he kind of says, "Oh, you're going to ask like what broads am I into? How are my friends doing? You know, all these things."
That's the word he says.
Yeah, yeah, right. I'm trying to keep it clean.
Yeah.
He basically just uses all of these like, platitudes, but he is trying to work against the grain here. And it's an accomplishment to him. Again, it's part of his philosophy. I'm not seen. There's nothing for me to do. Everyone is a fake and a phony. And this is something that feels real to me because it's such a different choice that anyone else would make. It makes me feel alive because I don't have anything else to make me feel alive and feel real. So I'm going to perform for you. Here's a show. Here, grab a ticket. Bring your friends. That's all I'm good for. I'm a dancing monkey. And that also ties in with the end as well.
With the bow, yeah.
Yes, and of course that bow. But that lychee scene, I feel like that was the first moment where he felt like he was good at something, he was proud, and he was performing.
Yeah, and he chewed the scenery for his parent. He was literally, but he was really hamming up the acting, which in a good way. Like, Kevin was not the actor. Right. Kevin was really like chewing on that monologue.
Yes. Oh, for sure. And yeah, there's so many.
He's towing the line. He's like pushing the barriers back.
Yeah. And the sounds are so crisp in that as well. And
that's the worst part.
Yeah. It's just another way for, I think, you to feel what he sees as, an idea in his head that no one would have thought of, that becomes a reality. So we hear the sound of him exploding the lychee in his mouth, and we're reliving what he's accomplished. Again, something no one else would do.
Right.
But because of that, that's how he works, right? It's because something that no one else would do. That's why they watch people on TV, which goes into another monologue that he has.
I was thinking about that.
Yeah, so let's go into that, because I think this gets into that sort of nihilistic philosophy that, or completely self-serving, almost satanical philosophy that he has. Where one of the scenes where he is visited by Eva in prison, he goes on this. It's right after he's probably captured, because he still has the long hair. He still has that very evil little smirk going, right. And he thinks he's so self-righteous. But he has this very sanctimonious speech that he gives her.
This is the right word.
Yeah, about what he thinks, performance is, and the reason for, almost explaining to her why he did what he did, but like the immature version.
Right.
And he's basically saying to her that, hey, if I was just getting good grades and doing my chores at home, why would anybody be paying any attention to me? And he said, that's why people watch TV. And he said, it's even worse. Even the people that are watching TV the TV are also watching TV. Yeah. And who are they watching, Mom? What are they watching? And he says, people like me. Jesse, what the hell does that mean? And how does that have to do with the meaning?
So many of these manifestos, they come out and they say, all this stuff they've been thinking about, they can't express, and they want attention, and
right.
And he's a teenager. He thinks he's deep, and he just acts.
Yeah.
It's one of those things where we go, yeah, we know TV's BS. Like, we get it.
Yeah.
Life is, life is hard.
It's not a revelation.
Yeah, exactly.
For those that have lived.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I remember, there's family like I remember saying stuff that was so smart, and then no one rebutted me, and I was 20, and I realized they were being nice. I'm a 20-year-old in college learning. They're not trying to stifle my learning. Yeah. And now I take that when I talk to younger people. I used to argue, and I'm like, why am I arguing with this guy who's learning?
Yeah.
I learned that lesson from that. I'm learning that lesson now.
Right. And if we could just, you can't count because it'd be too many, but if you could count everyone that's done these terrible things when they were a teenager just because they were a shitty little kid, you know? Because you can. You know, it's really weird. I was in Walmart yesterday. And in Simi Valley, I went to Walmart and I was all the way in the back getting like paper towels or something and all of the paper, the toilet paper and paper towels. And there were 3, like about Kevin's age, 13, maybe a little younger, 13, 14-year-olds. 3 of them just kind of, not hooligans per se, but just kind of laughing and walking by as preteens and teenagers do. And I was the only one back there with them. I was looking through stuff and they're kind of giggling to each other. One of them looks over to me and says, should my friend go back there and hide behind the paper towels? Because they were taking one out of the back to create a cavity back there so that his friend could go in there. And they went in there, and while the friend was doing it, the guy looks over at me, and his friend is like, should he do this? Should he hide behind the paper towels? And I said, I guess there are a lot worse things you could probably do. Go ahead. And then he looked at me and he said, are you going to snitch on us? And I said, there's no snitching. They have cameras. They're going to watch you do it anyway.
Yeah.
Okay. But the snickering and the laughing and the giggling, it excited them so much.
Yeah.
And for a second, I felt myself saying, I wish I could relive what that felt like. Because I've been so, hammered now by all of the mundanities of life. I wish I could feel like this kind of squealing sense of titillation and excitement
and freedom.
Yeah, like Ava does at the beginning in the Tomato Festival.
For it,
right? But the point is, they were so excited to do something that you and I, if we went in there, it would never cross our minds anymore.
Yeah.
To take paper towels out. And for you to crawl back there just to get a little picture for TikTok or something. It was innocent.
Or just put it in front of you and wait for someone to grab it.
Right. But what I'm saying is, yeah, but that impulse. The impulse at that age, when you're not dedicating yourself to other worldly things that matter a lot, that you're responsible for. It's the impulse to do things like that that's very interesting to me. Because there's just it's a blank slate other than those impulses, There's so much to learn, there's so much to experience. And I think that grafts onto Kevin perfectly. Except instead of being driven to impulses to crawl behind a paper towel stack, he's driven to impulses to torture people around him.
Yeah.
And it's very different. It's a very different consequence, right? It's a very different result. It's a different action. But I realized in that moment, it's essentially the same impulse, right? The actual driving factor of it. Like, wouldn't it be interesting and performative if I did this and put it on TikTok for everyone to see? Or even just for me to see. There was these 3 kids. They knew that I was there. Clearly, they were performing for someone. The kid was performing for his 2 other friends. And then because I said I'm not going to tattle on them, they're performing for me too. Mm-hmm. So I think the impulse was very similar. And I think we need to talk about these impulses in our very formative years of life. We need to talk about the depth of emotional, the emotional cavities that are in kids of this age. Kevin's only 15 when he does this, right? There's a gap between childhood and adulthood, like we talked about in Ghost World, because they do a lot of similar shenanigans and stuff like that to those kids. But
not to to adults even.
Right, sure,
and prank people,
exactly. And Kevin does his stuff to adults too, namely his mother.
Yeah,
but he's constantly manipulating. But there's this gap between childhood and adulthood, and in there are so many spiritual knowledge, philosophy cavities that have to be filled by something. And I think if there's not enough stimulation and just people really talking deeply about all of this stuff, just random moments in life even, but just really being there, being attentive, being emotionally available, supportive in all the little moments that we share in life. I think that this movie is saying something about that.
Yeah, and I mean, his room is empty. like we discussed, there's nothing in there, no stimulus, nothing for him to react to, or nothing. He's keeping it all inside. I do think he has stuff elsewhere. You know, if he's smart enough to do what he did, you know, live the way, you know, we see things. But
right.
I definitely think he has, you know, some sort of, not safe house, but like other place where he keeps his personal journals or stuff that he truly cares about.
Right.
But he doesn't have that ability to have those conversations with his parents.
Yeah.
Because one doesn't recognize it and one does.
Yeah.
And there's a gap between what you can do when you don't want to acknowledge it. Because the thing is, I keep talking about this relationship between Eva and Franklin, and it's because they don't communicate, because they have such a strong bond that they don't deal with any of the issues, let alone the big one.
Yeah.
You know, they don't. He tries to be the proud father. Franklin is the proud father who rubs his son's head and says, "I'm proud of you, bud."
Yeah.
You know, like good boy. Like he teaches him. You know, they're playing. I don't think they actually play fetch, but like catch. But fetch with your kid. It reminds me of Knocked Up. He's playing fetch.
Oh, that's right.
With my kids.
Yeah.
No, but you know, he's teaching it. He's being the father, and yet he's not teaching life lessons, it seems.
Right.
He's not, you know, there's no, hey, I'm giving you this bow and arrow because you're growing, you've been to the range, and now you got your own so you can practice outside.
Right. And
but
there's
I want to talk to you
responsibility with this too.
Exactly, but I want to talk to you about responsibility and safety.
Right. And I love how when even when he gets the first version, when he's a kid with the little sticky window clinger things, the kid just on the second arrow, he turns and shoots one toward his mom at the window.
Yeah, and she's like, "Are you kidding me?"
Right.
And the thing is, there's this whole time we think he hates her and loves his dad.
Yes, exactly, and that's what we're getting into. Because just to piggyback off of what you said about Franklin, he doesn't tell Kevin. You never point that toward the house, son.
Yeah.
Let alone toward your mother.
Yeah. You say always aim where you're aiming. You know, it's like a gun. You don't play with it.
Yes.
You don't aim where you're not intending to shoot. You don't point at anyone ever.
Yeah. And there are even moments where he's mean to his father, right? Like when there's a moment I want to talk about where sick Kevin, not sick mentally, because he kind of perpetually is, but when Kevin gets sick and he becomes close with his mother for a little bit.
Oh, when he's
reading the story and all that. But remember when his dad comes home from work and comes in, he's kind of cuddling with his mother reading the story, and he says to his father, "Go away. I'm busy," or something horrible like that. And what does he do?
He smiles. He loves it because we may be thinking of different moments.
Okay, I don't know if he loves it, but he definitely just says, "Oh, okay."
But
leaves.
And he does this sort of backing away and this like cute little smile that's like, "Ooh,
right.
I'm being the mom now." And he's like, "You get a turn of affection."
Yes.
That's what I was trying to get at.
Yes.
Is he's like, "Ooh, you know, I'm the out of favor parent, but you get some love." And he's actually kind of happy that there's a change. Yeah. I think he's not. He understands Kevin's a kid at that point. He doesn't take it personally.
Yeah.
Which is interesting because that's probably the right move.
Yeah.
In that moment.
Yeah, but it's very intriguing. I'm just wondering, why do you think that Kevin takes to Eva when he's sick? And then as soon as he feels better, of course, it's back to, "Go away, mommy, I can dress myself."
Yeah, I can dress myself. Do you want to take a stab at it? I haven't thought about that.
Sure.
This is your question.
Yeah, that's a tricky one. I was thinking about that a lot. It also, it actually, you know what it reminded me of? It reminded me of Woodcock in
Phantom Thread.
Phantom Thread, thank you.
Which we were talking about a few months ago.
Yeah, and you remember, of course, when he was sick, and that's kind of how the movie ends, and all that stuff.
She started. Yeah.
He wants to remain that way so that he can be subdued into being loved.
It's their dynamic, and they
right.
You know, they push and pull.
Right.
And they ebb and flow.
Yes, and I mean, I was thinking that he changes some sort of his view of the world because he's incapacitated. He has some sort of restriction. He can't go out. He can't go about and be free. And because of that, he's in need of care. And because of that, there's something about him that changes. It's almost as if he's saying that freedom somehow corrupts him. Because if he's free to do the thing that one should not do, he's going to do it.
Right.
But if he's incapacitated, then he can't. It's kind of interesting. Like, remember, it also in one of her visits to the jail to see him, he says, "Remember how I got this scar?" And it's, of course, when she threw him down and broke his arm.
Yeah.
And she actually says, "Do you remember how you got that?" And then he said, "It's the most honest thing you've ever done." Heavy, right? So he seems to think that...
Yeah, it's like he respects it.
Yeah, he respects it because he's looking for some sort of righteousness, I think, and justice in the world, where he's basically thinking, oh, well, if I do all this stuff, I can manipulate it in such a way where there are no consequences. So there's no point to anything, right?
Yeah.
But if he's incapacitated, or even when he's held in jail at the end,
right,
there's some sort of justice. Yeah, I think that's why he says there's an honesty there, because his mother finally did what she actually wanted to do, what she thought that the kid deserved. But because society and taboo and all that, like I said about Shriver's view, she wasn't able to do any of that, which is why he was impressed that she had this moment of like primal, intuition. And he favors those moments of primal intuition.
Yeah.
It's very complicated and strange, but it says something about the reality in which I think psychopaths live.
Yeah. The fact that she saw him, that she truly saw him.
Yes.
God. I mean, the fact that, okay, so I'm going to jump a little forward towards the end, but not getting there yet.
Sure.
There's the moment where they're having breakfast. You know, there are a couple scenes where he makes his sister get him root beer and he's being a jerk. And then there's that like jokey kind of brother-sister bond, but it's clearly fake. It's clearly pretend on his part. Even the pretend part is pretend.
Right.
The day of the incident, when she comes downstairs, she immediately knows something's wrong. That something's different. She walks in and says, "Hey, do you have a fever?" And she touches his head, no fever. And she just keeps looking at him like, what is going on?
Because he's pale and everything.
What are you up to? What is going on? And the first time we go, I don't know what that's about. But the second time I watched that,
yes,
the way the door slowly closes and the way he's just looking, waiting for her to leave.
Yeah.
Waiting for her to leave.
Yeah.
And we realize they never make it out the door.
Right. Exactly. Because he's still in his bath towel.
Yeah.
Once we see
it's the
Franklin
morning.
dead. Yeah, it's the morning. They never left.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One thing I thought about is, why is that window open?
Which window again?
The bedroom window.
Oh, clearly he left it open for her.
I don't think so.
You don't think so?
I think he shot from there.
Oh, interesting.
I don't know.
Even if he shot from like the deck,
yes, he left it open but why was it open in the first place? Is what I'm saying. I understand why he left it open. It's for her to find. But I was thinking about maybe he scared them out. I don't know, but how would they be out there without him chasing them and all this stuff? But I was just thinking, looking at the angle of the arrows, and it just feels like from up above,
maybe
towering over them.
He probably. I think he just told them like, "Hey, go check out." He told his father like, "Hey, there's something wrong with the archery target or something like that. Can you take a look at it?"
Or he got his sister to call for him.
Yeah,
and he's in his towel and he runs out.
Right? How? I don't think it matters. But we know that he's manipulative enough to be able to get anyone to do pretty much anything.
Exactly.
Yeah, in his family at least.
Right. But the reason I mentioned the window is because she views it I think she views the incident, finds them from the place where he killed them.
Yeah.
That's why I think it's important that not because of the logistics of how the door was open, but what it says about him.
Yeah.
That he did it from there.
Yeah.
From their parents' point of view and let his mother live.
Yeah. We'll get into talking about that more at the end, which is coming up very soon. There are a couple more little things I want to touch before we get there, though.
Yeah.
One of them is, as amazing as the performances are, Tilda Swinton and John C. Reilly and an incredible Ezra Miller, I think the real star of the show is Lynne Ramsay. And the way that she shows us who Kevin is and how he is, there are certain moments in this movie, Jesse, that always get me. It doesn't matter how many times I've seen this. If it's a rewatch a day later after I watched it.
Yeah.
There are certain moments that always get me. It's mesmerizing. And one of them is, I know it's just basically telling you little things that tell you the same thing, which are that Kevin can't feel. But I just want to go over some amazing moments that show us that Kevin can't feel. The number one that comes to mind is the scene where Kevin is masturbating. For some reason, that little moment always floors me because it's so unusual.
Yeah.
Right? If anyone, anywhere, except maybe this kind of a psychopath.
Yeah.
Every other movie is masturbating and they get caught by their mother of all people, right? No one just continues.
And stares grimacing.
Yeah, grimacing and, creepily at the mother while you're doing it. That scene, that moment cuts into me. It's like a sword slicing me open.
It's like tell someone. It's daring her to do something.
Yes. It's just so daring. It's so bold. It's so strange. And moments like that, you and I are writing a script together right now, and there are a lot of moments that are very tricky. I just want to reiterate this for our audience or for everyone. It's moments like that I find in movies and writing movies that it's so hard to find something that's very striking that you can write in, even if it's just a moment, that communicates something so clearly and it's so distinct because these moments don't happen in life very ordinarily. You have to create them out of thin air, She had to write that moment in and think, I don't know if it was in the book or not.
And create it with meaning.
Create it with meaning. The right amount of it, of course, too. But just to even think, I don't know if it was in the novel, but to even think about, it could be a note for, praising Shriver then too. But to even think about that is really astounding to me.
Yeah.
Something like that. And that in itself is a taboo,
Right.
Showing moments that are so incredibly personal that no one wants to really go into that territory and talk about it. And she doesn't stay on it too long at all. It's just the meaning of it. It's the presence of it in the movie is so cutting.
Yeah.
And then another one that I really enjoyed, more the second time, I didn't remember as much the first time, when they go on their mini golf outing. Mm-hmm. And this was so subtle, but it hit me like a ton of bricks the 15th time, remember she says, "Oh, you didn't bring a coat."
Yeah.
Everyone else in the mini golf is wearing a coat. It's cloudy. It's clearly like either the winter or the fall. She's wearing a good sized coat. Yeah. It's about to rain. And do you remember she actually she's shivering by the end when he does his last putt? She's shivering. She's like, "Oof, I got to get out of here." And he's there in this thin, tiny
Isn't it white?
Yeah, it's this thin, white little undershirt, basically. Yeah. And it's super short sleeves. And, it's like the cutaway thing where his belly's kind of showing, and those skinny jeans. And he doesn't shiver once at all in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah.
It looks like it actually was cold that day. So props to Ezra Miller for killing that. Sure. God, that must have been tough. But that was chilling, quite literally and figuratively to me. It was very chilling to watch that because, again, as you grow older, your mother tells you, wear a coat, right? Do you remember your coat? Bring your coat. And you learn eventually through just making that mistake over and over, oh my God, I really need a coat. It's freezing out. And even when you're a teenager, you forget the coat and you're shivering your butt off thinking, oh, this is why my mother tells me this all the time. I'm such an idiot, But him, nothing. And it was just, and I know that it's a movie and I know that it's just oh yeah, here, Ezra, just stand there and make it so that, you know, you're not cold at all. You, Tilda, shiver a little bit. But it's the effect that gives and how it's subtly given to me.
Yeah.
And once I get that nugget fully, that second, third, fifth time, it really has such a strong effect on me.
Yeah. Like,
these are all things that amount to him not feeling. It's just crazy.
Yeah.
Which is, again, part and parcel of sociopathy. All right, Jesse, this has been absolutely interesting in every way. I mean, what a cool movie, and I think you're doing a great job. I just want to go right into the closing because I want to give some time to this. There's some interesting dialogue being said here, and I'm just going to summarize this for everyone. I'll do this as quickly as I can. So the closing, I think, starts with a 2-shot where we see Kevin in the foreground and Eva sitting straight up beyond him in the juvenile
in the meeting
hall.
room where they're allowed
the juvenile detention center where they're allowed to visit. So we see him in the foreground. She's in the background. This is right after she kind of gets out of her car and the job is going a little bit better. And, you know, her life is sort of straightening out a little bit more. So there's a long silence when she's sitting there, which there often is in the movie when she's trying to address him or make something of what's happening in her life. She looks less sad than those other visits at this point. She kind of has this confidence to her. And Kevin, upon Kevin's first single shot, he gives a scared, vulnerable look. For the first time in the movie, he looks like this, right? He appears to be this lonely, sad, depressed, frightened child, right? That he doesn't know what's going to happen with him. And he has this conversation with his mother. She says something like, "You don't look very happy." And he responds saying, "Have I ever?" Okay, we find out that he's 17 now, and he's transferring out of the juvenile detention into some sort of regular prison. He's clearly terrified. He says to her, "Do you know anything about these places?" Referring to the ones he's going to transfer to. So he's still kind of condescending her intelligence. Like, do you even know anything? Right? But we find out it's been a couple of years since he did his wrong thing, and he's had plenty of time to think about it. Okay? And she says, "You managed it all so well, didn't you? You were tried as a minor. You were out of your head on Prozac." I guess he was on Prozac. And you'll be out of this new detention center in a couple years because of you did such a great job trying to do that. She's very sarcastic. I mean, she's basically also just telling him to kind of like shut up and just lie in the bed that you've made. Yeah. And I think that's a point to make. Then we know that it's the 2-year anniversary of his crime from what she says. And maybe for the first time, Eva actually takes an initiative to kind of challenge Kevin. And she looks at him very sternly. And she leans forward and says, "I want you to tell me why." Which is, of course, what we're wondering for the entire movie. Right? Mm-hmm. He's finally in this kind of submissive mode. He's listening and understanding her. He's digesting the question.
Because she's being honest.
Right.
Because she's talking about it. She's not hiding it.
Right. Tell me why. So after a long pause and not quite knowing exactly what to say, which is also kind of, typical for him, he says, "I used to think I knew." Then in a shaky voice, he says, "Now I'm not quite so sure." So his mom reacts as if she's unsatisfied, leaning back, but she knows that that's the most she's going to get out of him. Yeah. It just is. So she's also just kind of amazed, I think, in her reaction shot, watching her son suffer in front of her for the first time. She's not used to that. And so she nods. She knows this is all she's going to get. They share a strong hug after the guard says time's up. It's a strong hug.
Yeah, it's a really powerful hug. It's not just a hug.
Is.
It's not just a hug goodbye. It's a comforting hug.
Yes.
He rests his head on her.
Yeah, and it's like an "I got you" kind of hug. Yeah. So, and then Eva walks down that penitentiary hall in kind of a daze, which she is for a lot of the movie, but it's like every time she reacts, she finds a reaction from Kevin or speaks with him, it's like she's just absolutely bewildered as to what to think about this. There's so much processing involved here for her.
Yeah.
So she's trying to process what he said and pretty much everything else for that matter. She walks down and we get a close up with a handheld shot from Eva's point of view, approaching these double doors that lead to the outside world, which actually harkens back to a shot that's like that in the middle of the movie after she visits him one time. And then it dips to white as she approaches the doors, and there's this white light on the screen. Then it cuts to the first credit, which is white text over a sudden black background.
Right.
That just cuts right away from the white. The music fades away after the first few credits and then gives way to silence for a bit. And then a synthy drone comes in and stays kind of consistent for the next bunch of credits.
Yeah.
So what did you get basically out of this last moment, this last conversation, and what do you think of the final image of the double doors?
I mean, I honestly figured I figured the double doors was a way out and that the hug was the most important thing. Mm-hmm. I think the hug is that they finally see each other.
Yeah.
They finally get each other, or will open and honest with each other.
Right.
Like, we need to talk about Kevin. Okay, we're talking about it. Maybe not all of us, but.
Yeah. And it's not just we need to talk about Kevin. Kevin needs to talk about Kevin.
Yeah.
Eva needs to talk about Kevin.
Exactly.
In a very straightforward manner.
And they open that conversation up.
Yeah. And because of the entire course of the movie and what it's implying, we need to talk about Eva too. Yeah. Like, Eva does have this moment where she where she says, well, he's very, very young, extremely young, like still a baby or something. But she says, now every time every morning I wake up, Mommy wants to just be in France.
Yeah.
Mommy doesn't like Kevin, basically.
Yeah.
And of course, Franklin hears that, and that starts the whole thing.
Yeah. But, and there's also that line where she tells Kevin about his baby sister. And also another huge moment is she doesn't even discuss it with Franklin about having a second child. She just is pregnant, and like maybe it was an accident, maybe she planned it, but they didn't discuss it. He goes, "Where am I in this?"
Yeah.
But he doesn't also say anything about what he thinks. He's just upset he wasn't in the conversation. He doesn't have the conversation.
I think this might allude toward another aspect of that strong hug at the ending sequence, because not do they just get each other, but they're realizing that they are similar.
Yeah.
Right? She is also quite distant and quite even impulsive in some ways.
Yeah.
She wants to put maps on the wall. She wants to travel to Ecuador.
Yeah.
She wants to have another baby and not tell anyone. She's very insular, like him.
She wants
hatching her little ideas.
Yeah, she wants one that's better, almost, and he resents that. But she wanted a second try at it to see if it was her fault.
Yeah.
Or if it's her, or if it's him. But when she's telling Kevin for the first time, what I was trying to get at was their first moment of recognition, where she says, "You'll get used to him." And he goes, "Even if I get used to him, it doesn't mean I'm going to like him. You don't like me and you're used to me."
Yes.
And she doesn't deny it.
Oh, God. That is one hell of a line.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
And he's like 5, wearing a diaper because he's pretending not to be potty trained.
Right. Unbelievable.
But one more moment I wanted to talk about that leads to the end and is very much about Eva's connection to him is there's that shot in the very beginning and towards the end of her face in the water, breathing, right, breathing out, blowing the bubbles, I believe, and she sticks her whole face in it, and it's like that's her true nature. And
how so?
I'll tell. No, it's a matter. It's not actually a true nature. It's comparing it to. So Kevin just dips his finger in it, and it's so much worse. He doesn't even dip his whole head in. He just touches the water. Yeah. Because it's not her. He's not her. Yeah. It's not her fault.
However, at the very beginning, if you notice, there's that shot, the very first shot where she puts her head in the water, shakes her head, and it immediately cuts to his head underwater shaking.
Yeah.
So I think she's saying that both are true.
Yeah.
She is her own person than him because he taps the water later on in the movie.
Yeah.
And then fades into the next scene or whatever. But in that first moment, they have the same ills.
Yeah, but I think her thought process is growing throughout the movie. That's what's changing.
Yes.
Is that she's not him.
I think that's a good. I think that's probably the implication.
Yeah.
That's
that is
supposed to be.
that is
that's
the
intended.
growth in the
Yeah.
movie.
Yeah, I think that's the intention.
Yeah.
And there you go for people that say that there's no arc.
Yeah,
Right?
exactly. I was just thinking that.
Nailed it. Arc police. Jesse
Yeah.
Mendelsohn is on the case. So this final image. You said that you think that she's on her way out or a way out, you said? Through those
For the
double
movie,
doors?
I didn't have an answer.
Oh, okay. Yeah, well,
I have too many answers, but not enough.
exactly. So let me pick up
I'd
there.
love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, I took that final thing as just quite simply, this is her next go at trying out in the outside world, in life again. Because I think, again, Ramsay does repeat this shot. It happens after one of the visits that Ava does in the middle of the
Right.
movie. And it shows the same thing, same double doors. We approach it. There's a dip to white, and then it transitions to like the next moment. Mm-hmm. So I think she's going out into the world trying, but it doesn't work. Okay. There are too many things that keep smacking her back down. Like that extremely uncomfortable, for me at least, scene during the office Christmas party where the guy calls her, a stuck-up whatever, and where do you get off? No one's going to want you except me. And then it causes her to leave the party.
Yeah.
So all that stuff happens, and it's just totally gnawing away at her and beating the life out of her. But again, she starts with this different attitude in that room, in that last conversation. She's not deeply saddened like she was before. It's been 2 years. Things have processed. She's trying again. The paint is completely cleaned off of her house. It's a fresh start. So I think that after they have that, she's getting the most that she's going to get. She asserts herself as a parent in this scene. I think this ties in with this final image.
Yeah.
In the previous scene, in that discussion, she asserts herself as a parent. First, she says, "You over there, you boy, tell me."
Why?
She doesn't ask.
Yeah.
She tells him. It's a statement. It's a command. I want you to tell me right now why. I'm sick of this. I'm sick of shying away from this. And he responds like a boy who's being disciplined, who's slightly ashamed, right? Which is for the first time. So he answers her. And then the other thing that she does is she does this thing of the hard hug. I'm still here for you. After everything that's happened, after every ounce of torture that you have issued in my direction.
Yeah, for his whole life.
For his entire life, for 15 plus, for almost 16 years.
Yeah.
I'm still, and 2 years of living in exile and self-imposed torture. Thinking about this every second without my husband, who's, I can smell him and remember him every single day, and my beloved daughter, who you've killed. Even after all that, I'm still going to be here for you. Because I get you. I'm similar to you. I'm not you. But there are parts of me that are in you, and I see that. And after all of this tragic horror, I'm still going to be here when you get out in a couple of years or whatever it is she's implying. And I get it. And he just has this face on of he doesn't understand because he's still so young and he's made so many mistakes. But he doesn't understand how she can still forgive him after this. And I think the power that lies in that unbelievable forgiveness and understanding is his undoing. It's the one hope.
As a hardened shell.
Yes, it's undoing his whatever there is in him that's preventing him from wanting to do the right thing. Say it's that thing that gears him toward doing the wrong thing. It's that incredible, almost superhuman. I use that word for Bad Lieutenant as well. Superhuman level of understanding and forgiveness and loving kindness toward the person that ultimately breaks the cycle, breaks the spell in the character, and leaves enough of an imprint of this person actually gets me and is willing to forgive me through all of this, through my most vulnerable moment, enough to do that. Of course, she disciplines him first, basically, because she even says, "Oh, well, you managed it all so well, didn't you?" You know, it's rubbing his face in the poop.
Yeah,
a little bit there.
But she does what she should have been. You know, she takes charge the way she should have.
Right.
Not
exactly.
Not that, you know, he didn't make his own choices.
Right. And she's learned.
Yeah.
And it feels like he is learning. It's going to take a lot more for him to fully learn, but he's learning. And I think that he does see her compassion as something that's worthy of modeling. He's finally seeing her as a role model. There's a little tinge of that, I think, when she catches him across the street staring at her poster,
right,
for the book signing thing. And maybe in that moment he is studying her as a role model. Like, this woman's done something. She's on a poster. People see her. That's the performative thing that he seems to be interested in. But then he kind of reverts right back and says that he wasn't there. I think he fully sees that fully formed part of her in that moment. And because of all of these things that I'm talking about, I think that final image of her going out into the world again is her finally being able to, we don't see how or how long it takes or whatever, she's finally ready to integrate back into the world because she's learned how to change in her own respect. Wow. No matter how high the price was.
Yeah.
What do you think about that?
I think that's a very interesting take. I think that's probably, I often, once we get the climax / conclusion, I often turn off and just watch emotionally. Mm-hmm. So where I was watching that scene is the moment of the hug, I went, that's the end. Now we're just getting out of here. Right. So it's interesting because I never really think about those last moments. So I definitely think you're right about that. I was still thinking about that hug. I was still meditating on it.
Yeah.
And that just allowed me to exit the movie peacefully.
It's hard in this one, man, because there's so much emotion that's happening in you as a viewer.
Especially after seeing those horrific, sad images of the father and the daughter. And we haven't even talked about how well shot and sad those shots were, and they were just lying there in the wet grass for hours and hours. Like there was something primal about it.
Yes,
that is still reverberating through this moment because they're so close together. And of course, we didn't even talk about I just briefly want to mention her arriving at the school, and even before she sees the lock being cut, she's not scared. I mean, she's not afraid he's dead. She has a pit in her stomach, and she doesn't want to be a part of the group.
Yeah,
I think she's not fully sure.
Yeah, she definitely says, she kind of yells Kevin and looks around nervously and so on.
Because she hopes it's not him.
Yeah, that's that. You see, that is the interesting nugget about it. Does she know deep down that it might be him? She doesn't
go, my son's in there.
Right.
You know, she doesn't go, please, somebody, is he all right?
Like a lot of the other mothers are doing. There's a strong contrast in her performance.
She can barely say the words. She's having trouble saying the words. Sorry, we're getting back into it.
No, it's fine.
But I couldn't leave it without that.
Yeah.
But that all leads to this hug.
Yes, it does.
And it's hard for me to transition into the hug, and it takes me a few minutes.
Yeah.
And that's why that ending, I think, is so slow.
Yeah,
it could have ended on the hug. It could have ended on a push and or a pull out. You know, the camera moving on the hug, and then you just end. But I think you need a little more to sit with what that meant.
Yes.
I think that's what it's for.
Yeah, for sure.
It's for the audience.
It is.
I mean, the whole movie's for an audience, but that moment specifically is to settle the audience's thoughts.
Yeah, totally. And the movie just bombards you with so much, especially negative emotion at the end. But the pacing is so interesting, and you really feel that last conversation you really feel the difference between that conversation and every other conversation in the movie. With what little dialogue there is in the movie. And the movie actually gets a lot of flack for being having very little dialogue. I think it's great because, again, like we said, it's her consciousness. She's focusing on the very crucial moments only, which is how we remember things. But you really feel like the rhythms slow down. I think at the right time, it just feels so... It feels like such a logical conclusion rhythmically to where the story needs to go. It's all about, like you said, that hug, the little conversation that leads up to it, the hug itself that they never seem to ever share, except for one thing that I'm going to bring up in a second. And that just contrasts everything else. And it feels like the whole movie is draining into that pond that we get at the end, which is really fascinating. The one other thing I wanna get to here, Jesse, before we say goodbye, is, and I don't want to say goodbye because I've been having so much fun talking about this. Oh my goodness! I just want to see what we both think of really quickly, countering some of the arguments that we have already made and other people have made, namely that this Eva character is a bad and inadequate parent. Okay, a lot of people say that. I don't know what you think about it. I think we can all basically agree.
I think that's accurate.
Yeah, we can all basically agree that she's not a good parent. I think that's pretty clear in the movie.
Yeah, but the idea is that's not an excuse to do what he did. That's not a reason.
Right. I just wanted to see what you thought of this specific moments. Like, there's a shocking scene to me where she comes in. Shocking because you always remember so much of the terrible dark stuff and how inadequate she is as a parent and so on. This is what shocked me. She walks into his room. She kisses him on the cheek and says, "I love you, honey," or something like that. And he just says, "Nah, nah, nah, nah," or whatever. And she leaves. She has these moments. Or when he's sick and she says, he actually apologizes for vomiting and she says, "It's okay." He says, "I'm sorry, Mommy." And she says, "It's okay, sweetheart. It wasn't your fault." She has these moments where she does hug him.
She tries.
She does take care of him. But she
She's
does
putting
kiss
on a
him.
performance too. She's putting on a mask.
Oh, okay.
She
So tell us more.
definitely is.
Tell us more about that,
Okay.
because that's the counter.
I mean, the thing is, she's doing what the parenting books say. You know, she's like
right.
like when she says she's trying to like form it for him. Like when he says her room's ugly, she doesn't get mad. Well, she gets mad, but she says, "Well, you can do your room special the way you like, and I get to do my room the way I like."
Right.
You know, like that's how a parent would explain logically to a young person.
Yeah.
But it doesn't feel honest.
Yeah.
And then of course he wrecks the room. But and then of course in the sickness, of course the book is like a Robin Hood thing,
Right.
an archery thing,
Right.
So
right.
it's like she caused the idea.
Yeah.
It's like
killing the rich to save the poor.
Yeah. But really, it's the archery.
Yeah.
You know, it's like everything can be traced to her, but it's not her fault.
Right.
It's she was mean. She broke his arm. It's like all this awful stuff that she really shouldn't have done, and she should have done better.
Right. He basically egged that on, though, and then he used it to manipulate her.
Yeah.
So,
but how can you say that? How can you say that about a 5-year-old?
Of course.
You have to own the
Of course.
5-year-old. You have to win.
Right.
You know, you can't let a 5-year-old
Right.
do that. But
Yes.
also, specifically, the whole thing is about making her think it's his fault. It's her fault.
Right. Yeah. No, that's brilliant. That's very well said. And then the other thing is, I just want to tackle this real quick because the movie and everything we've been talking about is we need to talk about Kevin. Our whole point is that they don't talk about Kevin. I just want to challenge that for a second. They do talk about Kevin. I'll just give you a couple examples. I want to get your thoughts. Like we talked about the hospital already, but back to this scene of he's a sweet boy. Lynne, or the novel, I'm not sure about the novel, but they don't show us in the story what the conversation is. But she is talking to Franklin about it somehow, but she cuts to after the conversation. It's almost as if the conversation doesn't matter. It's the result. And then he does tell her, "Hey, That's just what boys do. He's a sweet little boy, Eva. He's just a boy. So she does take action somehow to reach out and try to explain things to Franklin. Is that more on Franklin? Is that still on her somehow? Does that amount to them still not really talking about Kevin? What do you think about that?
I mean, that's what she
Hospital
says.
And at home.
Well, she says, we need to talk about, maybe it's her, maybe it's not the conversation between the two of them. Maybe it's her telling Franklin, we need to talk about Kevin. And Franklin saying, we did. He's a boy.
Right. So maybe that's all she says.
Maybe, or maybe that, but I don't think so. But I think the title is her. I think she goes into more, but the idea, I always thought of the idea being a collective between Franklin and her, or the audience thinking about it. But now it really just is, to me, having sat through this conversation, maybe it is Eva pleading with Franklin. That's the title.
Right.
It's like, we need to talk about Kevin.
But of course, there's a bias built in from the beginning because
it is the bias,
right? Because he notices that she's upset when she's pregnant. He notices when she says to the 5-year-old,
she'd rather be in France. Yeah,
I'd rather be in France.
The 1-year-old,
baby, whatever it is, the toddler. So he knows since birth, and he even says, "I think you need to talk to someone," right? And of course, the true irony is he's the one that she needs to talk to, but he won't do it, right? And there's this question of where does it begin, right? In this cycle of misunderstanding, where do the failures begin? Where can the blame be put, right? Where can the cycle of misunderstanding and subversion?
And that's why she blames the tomato festival, the original moment.
She's tracing it back to that moment.
She's tracing it back to the moment.
Yeah,
that's why it's the first thing we see.
Because he's conceived, like if it's true that he met her that they met at the
even if that wasn't
festival.
the time that conceived him, that was the moment that he became real, because that's when they met. That's why, and I think it's her nature and her spirit that caused that moment to exist.
Right. So we're kind of like combining our takes, sort of. Yeah. There's so much more I feel to this movie, Jesse, than people give it credit for. Like what we've done here, I think is, I mean, Lynn, if you're listening to this, I really have to say how enthused I am to see a movie that's like this.
Yeah, and
because it's so clear that she and her husband at the time, who she wrote this with, rewrote it with even from the original draft, made it more small and focused when they realized that there was less money that was going to be available for the movie. There's so much in here that you and your co-writer and your team put into this in terms of detail and giving us such a thick, full bushel of things to talk about that stem from something that's ostensibly and at face value simple. It's not.
Yeah.
And you're giving us all those textures, and it's just, I just have to say, I don't like to be hyperbolic and praise people too much on here, because it's not what this is for. But I really, really, really think that this film is mesmerizing in its simplicity and complexity simultaneously. And I think the craft of how the film is put together in every respect is it's astonishingly astute. This is what cinema is for.
Yeah.
And I just want to say that. So the Speaking Cinema fan question for We Need to Talk About Kevin is, did you feel any sympathy for Eva? Why did you think you did or you didn't? And did you feel any sympathy for Kevin in the final scene? Why or why not? That's a tough question, right?
Yeah. And of course, my fan question.
Oh, go for it. I love it.
Was Seymour a virgin in Ghost World? And if so,
was Kevin a virgin?
No. Yeah, no.
I don't know. Almost certainly, maybe.
No, I'm not certain about that.
I don't know if he connected with people enough to even be able to understand.
I don't think that's the only thing.
Maybe this is another podcast. Maybe we could do a sequel.
I don't think he has to fall in love and really connect to another person to have sex.
Right. That's the second movie. We need to talk about Kevin's sex life.
No, but seriously. Anyway, the joke about Seymour's over, so we can move on. That was for you.
It's still funny to me. And anyone else that hasn't seen it, or listened to it rather, that's from Ghost World.
You're going to cut this moment because you cut the other two moments, so it won't make sense.
Yeah, but now I'm going to leave it in just so that everyone can hear that you said to cut it. Watch, I will. I'm like Kevin. I'm very impulsive. So I would like to extend a huge thank you to Jesse Mendelsohn again for coming, driving all the way here to my place in the studio, and for giving us exactly what we needed with this movie. All of the depth, all of the meaning. You watched it so many times, you studied, you thought very deeply about this, and I really think that you did the movie a huge service. You did a big service to Lionel Shriver, and to Lynne Ramsay, and to everyone that put this movie together. And I really appreciate all the time that you're putting into this. So thank you for coming.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Will you come back and do some more with us at some point?
We're doing Miami Vice next.
Oh, Miami Vice! So much meaning to be had there.
No, I'm not kidding.
Yeah, no, you love Miami Vice.
Yeah, no, we're probably not going to do it, but
yeah. But yeah, we'd love to have you back on. And thank you to all of you guys, the listeners out there. Please share and subscribe and follow. Leave a review, especially on whatever platform you find this on. It really, really helps us. And if you find this content valuable at all, please make some noise about it and share it and spread the word. Because again, this is the only cinema podcast exclusively about the meaning. We're trying to crack why these people make these movies in the first place and why they're such an important part of our culture, why they affect us so much, the real nitty-gritty reasons. So your feedback is always very much appreciated, and I would love to see you on the next episode. We will be posting what each movie's going to be, as we've continuously done, 1 week prior to the dropping the episode, and that can be found on Speaking Cinema Podcast, which is the Instagram handle, Andrew Schwartz Media, which is my Instagram handle, and I'll put all this in the description. But yeah, stay tuned with us on social media, spread the word, and we will keep giving you content that's like this, but not without your help. So thank you so much for listening. I'll see you on the next episode.